Have you ever thought about how much your handwriting could reveal about you? I mean, it's kind of amazing how the way we write those little letters can actually offer a peek into our personalities, our thoughts, even maybe some stuff from our past.
Yeah, it really is fascinating. In this digital age, we kind of take handwriting for granted. We're all typing and texting. But those tiny details, like how we shape our letters, how much pressure we use, even the rhythm of our writing, all that can tell a story about who we are deep down.
Absolutely. And in this deep dive, we're going to really dig into that. We're going to be looking closely at a single handwriting sample and see what kind of secrets it holds. This came from a live coaching call hosted by Bart Baggett, the founder of Handwriting University. So we're tapping into some real expertise here.
Now, this is where it gets really cool for you listening in. As we talk, you'll actually see the handwriting sample we're dissecting right on your screen. We'll be pointing out specific details, so keep your eyes peeled. And we'll be sharing some of the interpretations from that live session, not just Bart's insights, but also from the other people on the call.
And we've got some interesting voices in the mix. There was Jean, a business owner from Dallas. She's been studying handwriting analysis for like 40 years. She learned from Dr. Ray Walker, a real pioneer in the field. We also had Ari, a business owner and publisher all the way from Indonesia, and Zara, who's based in New Mexico. So different perspectives, different backgrounds, all coming together to analyze this one handwriting sample.
That's right. And our mission, if you will, is to unlock those hidden messages in the strokes. We want to see what personality traits pop out, maybe even some hints about the writer's life experiences, all based on what we can see in the visual you have right there in front of you.
All right, let's jump right in.
Ah.
Right off the bat, something caught Bart's eye. He described it as kind of drastic, something that really stood out. And Jean, you zeroed in on a particular letter, didn't you? Something a bit unusual.
Yeah, Jean immediately focused on the capital I. Now, if you take a look at the sample, look at the bottom of that I, you'll notice a double stroke, almost like a little loop, and it happens twice. Not just a fluke, it seems intentional.
It really jumps out at you, doesn't it? And Jean's first reaction was pretty interesting. She wondered, does he have two dads? Now, for those of us trying to decipher these letter formations, what's the typical interpretation of those loops in the capital I?
Well, traditionally, those loops have been linked to parental figures. So some graphologists, like Sheila Lowe, they say the first loop could represent the mother and the second one, the father. But gotta be careful here, interpretations can differ. It's not an exact science. Bart himself admitted he's only been about 50-50 accurate when trying to pinpoint specific parents based on those loops.
Which makes this I, with its multiple loops and that kind of strange last stroke, even more puzzling. It's not the usual single or double loop you might expect.
Right. It's almost like there are three distinct loop-like shapes in there, and if you follow that last stroke, it kind of goes backwards, almost like a lowercase d, definitely not your textbook capital I.
And Bart, in his analysis, he decided to kind of skip over what he called the initial hook at the beginning of that I and focus on those two loops that come after. His interpretation of that second loop, the one with the angle that doesn't quite connect, that was pretty direct.
Yeah, he saw that angle in the second loop as potential unresolved anger, specifically directed towards the father figure. You see, in handwriting analysis, angles often represent assertive energy, even a bit piercing, like you said. And that contrasts with rounded shapes, which usually point to more nurturing maternal qualities.
He did emphasize, though, that interpreting parental relationships based solely on the capital I is not foolproof. It's just one piece of the puzzle, right?
Totally. There's always more to the story. And given all the complexities and different interpretations out there, Bert usually frames his insights around potential issues in parental relationships. Like, he might suggest things were fragile or maybe even non-existent, rather than making absolute pronouncements about who's who in the family picture.
So stepping back from that very intriguing I, Bart also noticed something about the overall flow of the writing, or maybe the lack of flow. If you glance at the sample, it's pretty clear what he was talking about.
Yeah, he called it unfluid, like riding a bike with a wobbly wheel. It's not smooth, it's kind of jerky, and at first that disjointedness might make you think, oh, this person's a bit unstable. But then Bart, he made a really thoughtful connection. He brought up the writer's age. This person is 30 years old, born around 1990.
Now that's important because that's right around when schools in the U.S. started phasing out cursive writing. Less penmanship practice for kids.
Exactly. And Bart shared that his interpretation of this unfluid writing has actually changed over time. In the past, he might have seen it as a sign of inner turmoil, but now he considers the possibility that it's simply a lack of practice. People just aren't writing cursive as much anymore, so their handwriting might look less smooth, less connected.
That's a really key point. Our cultural shifts, like how we teach kids to write, can actually affect handwriting patterns and how we analyze them. So let's move down the page a bit and focus on those lower loops, specifically the ones in the letter Y. Ari had a really interesting initial thought about these. Take a look at how those Y loops are formed in the sample.
Yeah, Ari brought up an idea from Trace Montoya, another handwriting expert. She mentioned that narrow lower loops could suggest someone who's very selective in making friends, like they're really choosy about who they let into their inner circle.
And Bart, he backed that up, but he also expanded on the meaning behind those lower loops. It's not just about friendships, is it? There's a deeper layer there.
Right. In the past, handwriting analysis might have linked those lower loops more directly to sexuality, but the understanding has evolved. Now the focus is on energy and emotional trust. The length of the loop, Bart explained, can reflect someone's overall energy level. He even used the example of how testosterone, hormones, could influence the size and sweep of that Y in men's handwriting.
Fascinating. So with this particular sample, what about the width of those Y loops? Because that seems to be where the whole choosy in friendships idea comes from. Look at the Y in words like very in the sample. You can see what they were talking about.
Exactly. It's all about emotional trust. When those lower loops are narrow, constricted, like in this sample, it can indicate a holding back, a repression of trust. It's like they're closing themselves off emotionally, protecting themselves. Bart explained that this narrowness often pops up after someone's been hurt or let down, experiences that make them cautious about opening up again.
I like how he explained it. He said it's kind of like seeing a car with dents and scratches and immediately thinking, whoa, this car has been through something. Same with handwriting. Certain patterns can hint at past emotional experiences.
And Ari's take on the writer being very choosy with friends, it fits right in with that idea of guarded trust. She called it a way of saying, I don't want to get hurt again, like a defense mechanism.
Which is completely different from someone whose handwriting shows big open Y loops. Bart pointed out those folks might be too trusting, maybe even a little gullible. So bottom line, with those narrow and inconsistent lower zone loops in this sample, what was Bart's assessment of the writer's personality?
Well, based on those features, he concluded this person probably struggles with intimacy, with letting people in emotionally. Forming deep, trusting bonds might be a challenge for them.
Now, taking a step back and looking at the overall quality of the writing, it wasn't exactly neat and tidy, was it? There's definitely some variation in how the letters are formed. If you scan the whole page, you'll see what I mean.
Yeah, Bart called it all over the place, no consistent pattern or rhythm. He pointed out the different letter sizes, some big, some small, no real consistency. He even mentioned what he calls big buckle Ks. Those are Ks where that upper loop is super exaggerated, and it can indicate defiance, like someone who wants things their way. You can spot a few of those in the sample.
And there are quite a few corrections and crossouts, too. What did Bart make of those?
Initially, he thought maybe the person has trouble remembering how to form the letters correctly, like struggling with a language they haven't used in a while. But then, remembering how cursive writing isn't as common these days, he decided not to read too much into those errors. He gave them a huge pass, meaning he didn't want to overanalyze them as personality indicators, especially since this person might not have practiced cursive much lately.
Makes sense. We don't want to jump to conclusions about someone's character based on errors that could simply be due to lack of practice. Now, let's take a look at those T-bars, the little lines that cross the T. Where are they placed in this sample? Check out words like little or bit.
Notice how those T-bars sit high up on the stem in that upper quarter? Bart also described them as thin and tall, very deliberate strokes.
Ari's first impression was that those high, thin T-bars reveal tension, like the person overthinks things, maybe even has some anxiety. But Bart, he likes to focus on more specific traits before making those big generalizations.
That's his style, very methodical. He reminded everyone that the upper zone of handwriting, where those T-bars are, it represents our thoughts, ideas, future goals, all that.
So what do high T-bars usually tell us about those thoughts and goals?
Well, generally they point towards ambition, someone who's future-oriented, has high self-esteem. But in this sample, Bart drew attention to the height of the T-stem itself. It's almost as tall as some capital letters. Very unusual.
He contrasted that with a tall, loopy D, which can indicate sensitivity to criticism. But this sample doesn't have that kind of D. So those tall, thin T-bars without the sensitive D, what did Bart conclude?
This is what I think, and I'm not swayed by what you say.
There's also a clear V formation in the writing. Sarah spotted that one. If you scan the sample, you might see it.
Yep, Zara picked up on that V right away and immediately thought stubbornness. And Barr agreed, even though it only appears once, that defined V shape is a strong indicator of that trait.
And then Bart moved on to what he called a really important trait, something that reveals a lot about someone's motivation for success. And it all comes down to the lowercase d. Notice how tall those D stems are compared to other lowercase letters. It's pretty striking.
This is where things got really insightful. Bart explained that those super tall D stems show a strong desire for status, what he calls vanity, in handwriting analysis. He even told a story about two super successful business guys he worked with in India. Both of them had those sky-high D stems.
And while they were successful, that need for status came with some baggage, right? Some interpersonal challenges.
Oh, yeah. He even shared how one of them, after becoming successful within their partnership, ended up copying Bart's books and not honoring their agreements. It's like once his need for status was met, his behavior changed.
He did clarify that this isn't a universal truth about everyone with this trait. His personal experience doesn't represent everyone, but he did connect it to people in sales, those who thrive on recognition and climbing that ladder.
He also brought in a concept from his new book, something about a superiority complex. He suggested that for some people, this need to feel superior fuels their drive to achieve, even if it causes friction in their relationships. And another participant, Chandra, she pointed out that if you want to get along with someone who has this trait, you got to understand that need for recognition and appeal to it.
It's complex, isn't it? That drive for status can be powerful, but it can also create some bumps along the way.
Absolutely. It's not necessarily a trait you'd want in a close partner, but it's common in high achievers, those who really go after what they want.
Now, towards the end of the coaching call, Jean dropped a bit of a bombshell. She revealed some info that completely changed how we might view the handwriting sample.
Right. Jean shared that the person whose handwriting they were analyzing, he didn't get hired by her company. And the reason? A background check revealed he was a registered sex offender.
Whoa, that definitely changes things. You can imagine how surprised Bart was. Talk about a plot twist.
And Jean suggested they revisit those narrow way loops with this new information in mind. Maybe there was more to see there. Ari also pointed out a detail she'd noticed earlier, a broken line in the Y of very. See if you can spot it in the sample.
So what did Ari make of that broken line, especially knowing this new information?
She drew on some traditional handwriting analysis and said that a broken line down in that lower zone, especially in a man's handwriting, it could hint at potency issues. She also noticed a slight tremor in some of the lines, which in some cases could indicate addiction. Although Bart did say that interpretation has become less reliable with the decline of cursive, those breaks and tremors might just be from not writing smoothly.
So taking all this new information into account, what were Bart's final thoughts on the handwriting sample?
He went back to his earlier observations about the inconsistency and frustration in the writing. He called it a messy mind, suggesting a lot of inner turmoil, and he made a really important point about the term sex offender. He reminded everyone that it's a broad legal term that covers a wide range of offenses. Not all sex offenders are violent criminals, and it's crucial to remember that.
Such an important reminder, not to jump to conclusions based on labels. We don't know the specifics of this person's situation, just that he has this designation on his record.
Exactly. The handwriting analysis only provides a limited perspective.
So even without knowing that crucial piece of information at the beginning, the handwriting analysis already revealed a lot. Potential struggles with parents, difficulty with trust and emotional openness, that strong desire for status, plus the lack of fluidity, likely from not writing cursive much.
And that later revelation added another layer. It made everyone look at certain strokes differently, particularly those lower loops. It shows how everything's connected, how different traits can weave together to paint a picture of someone's inner world.
It really highlights the complexity of handwriting analysis. It's not a simple code to crack. It's more like piecing together a puzzle, looking for patterns, but also understanding the limitations. It gives us a fascinating glimpse into someone's personality and potential life experiences, but it's not the whole story.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? I mean, look at your own handwriting. What does it say about you? What secrets are hidden in those loops and strokes? What's your handwriting story?
To start looking at the handwriting around us with a new perspective.
Exactly. And who knows what fascinating insights we might uncover. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.